All right. What's going on with y'all? What's going on with y'all? JMyraxAltruwest.com. Back again. Hope you guys had a very great Thanksgiving and hopefully you had some time off to relax, recuperate, and enjoy family and friends. So yeah, definitely thank you guys again for joining my channel as always. Thank you for contributing to the conversations. Thank you for your subscriptions and everything else, all your support for this channel. I really appreciate it. Yeah, like I said, I'm gonna do more of these midday streams. DiBiase, what's good with you, my bro? Yeah, we're gonna get it in. As you can see from the title, we're gonna talk about it today. We're gonna talk about it. I think the title speaks for itself, but I'll just read it. Do old school producers have a secret jealousy? I want to get into that today because I think just from the nature of the conversations we've been having on this channel over the past couple weeks now, you can sense that there are people that get the impression that old head producers like myself, like EA Ski, for example, have some type of jealousy towards the younger producers and producers that are just coming into the music production craft. So let's get into it because I just want to clear the record here. I want to get the record straight here as far as like what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why the message may come across the way it comes across. So, you know, I consider myself an old head producer. I've been making music for over 20 years now. I'm definitely in my 40s. So I hit old head producer by some standards, or by today's standards, probably a decade ago. So I've been an old head producer for some time. I think to answer this question directly, do old school producers have a secret jealousy? I would say the producer community is not a monolith by any measure or any metric. It's not a monolith at all. Obviously, we all have different tastes. We all are like striving for different things. We're all motivated by different things. And even just the things that inspired us to initially get into music production are different. And that's regardless of whether you're an old head or a young head. Like even amongst younger heads, all their motivations are not monolithic. They all, like, everybody has different reasons why they are interested in doing music, and they have different tastes and different artists that they're into and just different things that inspire them in the end. So I think this idea of old heads or old school producers having a secret jealousy towards the younger producers, it can be true in some cases. There are definitely some older producers that are jealous of younger producers for various reasons. I think, you know, if you just look at music production today and the level of technology and just the opportunities to get yourself heard and to grow your own fan base and whatnot, and opportunities to get music done very quickly. A lot of that stuff is just much more widely accessible for a younger producer coming up today than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. And what it means is that if you are a producer that understands your craft today. If you start young, you could start like 10, 11, 12. Some producers start younger than that. But if you start at say 10 years old and you have today's technology as far as DAWs and virtual instruments and all the AI tools that allow you to create music quickly, you look at all that stuff and you say, okay, well, a young producer today that has ample time in their pre-teens, teens, and early adulthood can make much more quick strides towards becoming a professional and highly musically proficient music producer. They can do that much quicker today than an old head could back in the days of hardware and tape and especially the ones that grew up pre DAWs or pre-modern DAWs, because DAWs have always kind of existed for at least the last 40 years or so in some way, shape, or form. But I think when we talk about DAWs, we're talking about modern DAWs that can basically host VSTs, record full audio tracks, do all the MIDI and everything else in between, mastering and whatnot. The modern DAW, if you look at the capabilities of that compared to what an old head may have had to go through with, like, hey, I have a drum machine and it's like an old drum machine and I got to record to tape, tape cassette deck even to save my beats. And, it's a hassle. I got floppy disk and all that stuff. If you compare that experience, I could see where an old head may be a little salty towards the younger community of producers that don't have to work as hard to get music done. So it's I would say there are definitely older heads that have some sort of just adverse, nasty reaction to the attitude, the confidence, and the spirit of the younger producer that sees it as a way to get in and like really propel themselves quickly and doesn't necessarily want to spend a lot of time on music production for that matter. Because I think that's the other thing. Like if you look at an old head that was used to having to spend a lot of time to make a beat because just technology was a little slower and just the process was slower. And then you compare that to a younger head that has only known like very quick workflows, very quick recording, very quick, production. And now they actually can make a beat in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. There's not a good reason for them to want to spend a lot of time making beats. And, digging a little deeper, looking at the economy of music, right? There are definitely less rewards today for spending a lot of time for many people when it's just going to go to Spotify or some other DSP or something like this now, right? You send it to a DSP and then it gets streamed, it gets streamed and they're like, well, I'm not making any money off of streams anyhow. So a lot of the younger producers today play a game of quantity because that's really the only way that they can make it profitable for them. It becomes a quantity game now. So the whole idea of spending a lot of time and doing things the old-fashioned way is not appealing to a lot of younger producers, and that may really anger or just make older producers feel like the younger generation doesn't have the same passion, heart, or love for music production. So I think that we definitely have some tension between different generations for those reasons. There's a lot of that going on, and bringing it back to just the conversation where we've been having about the MPC XSE and the SP1200 Machine Plus and, all that stuff, right? Some of it does come across as old versus new. Obviously, MPC 4000 is not in production anymore. It's an old classic MPC by today's standards. So on this channel, we're doing comparisons, and it may come across as like old head is trying to take a crap on new technology, and old head is resistant to change, and old head is stuck in his ways, and all of that kind of stuff that you often see older heads being accused of when they are making really just making a opinion or providing an opinion on a topic that they also have studied and have participated in for a long time. I think for my channel, we come from a perspective of just looking at understanding the tools that we're using and making sure that we're making the right decision around the tools when we're approaching music. It's not, this channel is never about just championing old. If that were the case, if I was just going to champion old on this channel, you guys would have never ever seen me use things like iPads in my music production, which I have plenty of videos showing me using iPads only. I have video, like realistically, if I was going to be a producer that is just resistant to technology, I wouldn't have even, you've never would have seen me use Machine. Like Machine would have been like, no, that's too new school. It doesn't have outs. It doesn't have this. It doesn't have that old school sampling, sample sound or whatever. You would have never seen me do anything like that. As a person that has worked in music tech since 2005, so almost 20 years working professionally in music tech, I'm not a stranger to technology, and I'm not someone that is resistant to technology. I think technology is good. I think there's a lot of good things to be had from technology, and I think technology can make certain aspects of our work and our lifestyle a bit easier to manage. I'm playing with AI for different things right now. And I find that AI makes sense in certain areas where I don't need to spend a lot of time, or I shouldn't be spending a lot of time working on these things. I think AI does a good enough job for me to get certain stuff done now. So I'm not resistant to technology, but I'm an artist. I have a opinion. I have a perspective. I have my own taste in the end. And because I have my own taste, I incorporate that into the perspective that I bring on this channel specifically. If you look on my main page on YouTube, it says music production tips with a West Coast perspective. So I'm bringing my perspective. Now, I don't claim to have the perspective of the entire West Coast, because the West Coast is large and it has like a lot of different diversity in that. And I think that because the channel is Ultra West, and my website is ultrawest.com, we do come from a West Coast perspective. That's why I make West Coast beats on this channel, and that's why I kind of incorporate a lot of those types of beats in even the demonstrations we do. So like when I did the SP1200 and the MPCX and the 4000 comparisons, you heard West Coast drum patterns. You didn't hear, what will be traditionally a boom bap, or East Coast pattern or whatever. You didn't hear nothing like that. You definitely didn't hear a trap pattern. You heard West Coast patterns to demonstrate what we're doing on a music production level. So all that being said, I bring my perspective to these chats and conversations. And I have a specific perspective because of the influences that I've had, what I grew up around, what music I grew up listening to, the music influences that came through my family, and all of that plays a part into like what has formed into my taste musically and what I like to hear when I'm listening to music. So when I comment as an older music producer on different drum machines and different sounds, I'm coming from that perspective as well. I'm bringing all of those years of listening to different music and comparing different music and evaluating it, analyzing it on different speakers and hearing how they sound and hearing how the mix is set up and how different sounds cut through a mix. I'm using all that as a benchmark to judge what I'm hearing on different machines. It is being processed through that filter as well. Does that mean that that's the only way that we can process or listen to music is just through the perspective that I had? No, obviously, like I said, each of us have our own tastes. We each have different backgrounds and a totally different music journey and a totally different cultural journey for that matter that we've gone through that shapes who we are as musicians and craftsmen within music production. So we all have different tastes and we're allowed to have that. I think that's what informs our art in the end is our taste and the things that we're influenced by. So I think from that perspective, me personally, I am not hating or I don't have any jealousy towards anyone that has newer modern equipment or, prefers a modern sound or whatever your taste are. I don't have jealousy towards any younger producers because of what they like. You like what you like at the end of the day. I definitely don't have any jealousy towards you based on the gear choices that you have, because if you have an MPC X or a Live or a One, well, listen, I have at least two of those in my own studio. I have the X and I have the One. No jealousy there. I have the same equipment as you. I'm just judging it based upon my perspective of what sounds good musically. And that's why we did blind tests as well in the past, in the last test especially, because I think now you guys gave your unbiased opinion on what you thought sounded good, and it was interesting to hear the perspective that a lot of you brought to the table. It was interesting to hear a lot of you guys say, yeah, I like the way that machine sounded in that last test over everything else. That's just your taste. That's what you're accustomed to hearing or what you prefer to hear in the end. I don't think that makes you a hater. That doesn't make you anything but just a person that has his own taste, has their own taste, and has their own things that they are, I guess, attracted to as far as music and sound is concerned. So I think whatever is appealing to you musically is what you should lean into in the end, because that helps to inform your instinct towards music and how you create music. Like, you should lean in towards things that are naturally appealing to you musically and start to refine your approach to that to become a better music producer in the end. That doesn't make you an old head. It doesn't make you stubborn. It doesn't make you anything but just a human that does art in the end. So I think we've got to stop trying to write older producers off because they are expressing their taste in music. Because it always becomes this like battle of like, oh, you're just old and you're not hip to the new sounds and you're not hip to what's going on in the streets right now and XYZ. It's not necessarily that at all. Like, someone can hear what's going on and say, I don't relate to it, and therefore it doesn't appeal to me because I don't relate to the perspective that they're bringing. I don't live the type of lifestyle. I don't come from the same culture or generation. So therefore the music doesn't resonate with me, right? I think that is a fair analysis from an old head that a younger head has to be able to accept and digest that. Now, if an older head says that some younger music is whack, for example, it's whack to them. That doesn't mean that there's not an audience out there that doesn't love it, or, I should say, that doesn't mean that there's not an audience out there that like doesn't love it at all. It's just more so To the old head, he doesn't love it. They don't love it. Um, I think I'm torn a lot of times when I hear different music from younger generations. I think there's a lot of great music out there from younger artists. I tend to find myself loving younger artists that have clearly studied the craft and are bringing something artistically sound and bringing something that has a bit more craftsmanship towards it in the end. I really enjoy listening to an artist like that respects what they're doing. I can give an example of like maybe a younger producer that I enjoy as far as music is concerned. Um, Let me see here. Just looking recent albums that I bought. Um, let's see here. Good example. There's many actually, but just want to pull out one that really stuck with me. Leon Thomas is a good example. I think Leon Thomas, he's a younger producer. I enjoy his music. I think his music comes across as being well studied. He's younger than me. He's maybe by some standards he's an old head already. But Leon Thomas is 31 years old, so definitely a whole decade or 10 years plus younger than me. So to me, he's a younger producer, but he comes across as someone that has refined his craft and really understands the music and what he's trying to do. And I enjoy his music. I think his music is mature as far as like the technicality of it. I think Leon Thomas still probably has some growth to do as far as sonics are concerned. I think, some of the stuff I think could stand to have stronger mixes, but I think overall, I really enjoy the music. I think he's an excellent musician, an excellent music producer that really showcases a lot and has a lot of potential to be a very formidable music producer in the future. I can see him producing for a lot of bigger artists as far as R&B and soul is concerned, especially. So it's just producers like that where I look at and listen to them and I respect what they do. It's not the same thing that I do, but I definitely appreciate the effort and the amount of skill that they bring and the passion that you can hear in the music. That's what I care about in the end. I don't care so much about, whether it's coming from an old head. I don't only listen to stuff that comes from DJ Premier and Jay Dilla and DJ Battle Cat and DJ Quick and Dr. Dre. I don't only listen to that. I listen to a wide variety of music actually, and I try to give everything a chance. I just make sure that I stay true to what actually sounds good to my ears in the end. I think that's the important part. Does it sound good to my ears? And if it sounds good to my ears, then I'm rolling with it. I'm going to roll with it and I'm going to support it. I don't care what drum machine it came out of, if it came off from an iPad, if it came from Logic, if it came from Studio One, it doesn't matter in the end. What matters is the music. But I think as an old head, I just come from a different perspective where I'm also looking at, interesting. Like this person has brought influences from this and that. You can tell when a musician is studied. You can tell when a musician is doing their homework on music and is practicing. And I think that's more important to me. I think being jealous of someone because they have more access and opportunities than I had when I was first getting into music production does me no good. And I think a lot of music producers that are older actually feel the same way. I think a lot of music producers that are older generally just care about music and they have taste. And if their tastes are not the same as yours as a younger producer, that doesn't mean that they're a hater. And vice versa. I think as a younger producer, you just have to respect, like, hey, your tastes are different too. Like, I know a lot of younger producers grew up watching different types of movies and films and other types of visual content. I look at the difference in like some of the cartoons that we grew up with. And let's not discount the importance of like cartoons, because there was a whole period in hip hop where like cartoons were like being sampled, and that was kind of a thing for a while. I think the cartoons that we grew up with are different in different generations. So, you know, cartoons have a major impact because like the amount of the sound and the visual representations and all the influences that come through that medium have an impact on our taste as well. So if you grew up watching, Charlie Brown or, Tom and Jerry or something like that, and then you're talking to a producer that grew up watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And Dragon Ball Z, you guys may have different taste. It just is what it is. You guys may have different tastes. You guys don't have the same perspective. You guys have heard different things and have been attracted to different things and different perspectives. Somebody just mentioned Inspector Gadget was a big hip hop flip. Of course, I definitely remember hearing a lot of flips of Inspector Gadget. I flipped Inspector Gadget about 20 years ago myself. Like, cartoons have a big influence on music production. So I think the music that we listen to at a young age is the most impactful music that helps to define our taste in the end. I think somewhere between like 4th grade and probably 10th grade, I would say, is where we start to really like refine and kind of define what our tastes are musically. And that music becomes super important. And I think it lays the foundation for a lot of music producers. So I think if you grew up, listening to or looking at G.I. Joe and Transformers, that has an impact. Like the Transformers theme song alone, like I find myself singing that still. And I'm talking about the OG one with the crazy jazz scales going on and stuff. Like that one from the 80s. Listen to the theme song on that, the Transformers theme song. Crazy music right there. So if those type of tunes are going around in your head as a music producer because that's what you heard when you were, 5 years old, it has a major impact on like what you hear musically. Like that Transformers theme impacts me still. Just like, yeah, the scales and the things that they were doing in that, ridiculous. If you were a kid, if you're a little bit older or younger, I should say, and you grew up watching stuff like DuckTales and, Darkwing Duck, those themes are going to have an impact on what you like as well. Like, cause you got to think about, especially I say cartoons because like before you start to really like even get a chance to buy your own music, you can watch TV, you can watch cartoons, you can watch those daily. So you're hearing the same theme song come on daily. So you're talking about like someone like me, I grew up watching DuckTales and Tailspin and like that music there, you remember that stuff. Those themes were catchy. Those themes have an impact and have helped to form your taste amongst other things. We're not even getting into like the traditional, like just recorded music. I'm just talking about stuff that you may have ingested as far as music is concerned. You may have consumed that daily. And let's not forget that is going to have some type of impact or influence on what you gravitate towards musically. The person that grew up listening to or watching Animaniacs or something like that is going to have a different perspective from someone that grew up watching Dragon Ball Z. Does it mean that, the He-Man, Transformer, G.I. Joe generation is better than the Dragon Ball Z generation? No, absolutely not. I think, they all bring different things to the table, and they're all important. And I just think we have to respect that each generation grew up with different stuff, and it's okay. It is very much okay. There's nothing to be jealous about. If you're an older cat that grew up watching Fat Albert, think about what we're talking about here. I'm bringing cartoons to the mixer. Like I said, that's like super like important in terms of formative years. If you grew up listening or watching Fat Albert, the music, the level of music in that, you're talking about Fat Albert, Herbie Hancock. If you grew up watching that, and that Fat Albert is a little bit before my time. I grew up watching reruns of it, but if you grew up watching Fat Albert, your taste in music are probably a lot different than someone that grew up with Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon. I just no doubt about it. It's going to be different, and it doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make the younger generation wrong. I think one thing I do say is I do feel like millennial parents especially have to do a better job of making sure that they expose the kids to like some of the stuff that they grew up on as well. I think that's very important just for like cultural conservation and cultural continuity. It's important to pass down that stuff and like provide those influences as well. Like just like I could talk about a Fat Albert, even though Fat Albert technically came out before I was born. I think ultimately it doesn't matter if a younger generation grew up watching something different. It just means they're going to have different tastes, and they care about things that are a little bit different just based upon what they were exposed to at a young age. So I don't think it's hate. I never thought that the comparisons around drum machines had to be grounded in some type of hate or disdain towards the younger producers. I think it's really my perspective at the end of the day, and I'm sharing my observation through a lens that is over 40 years old at this point, and I'm providing my take because it may be helpful for someone that may be younger, that maybe hasn't had an opportunity to compare a lot of things, haven't had an opportunity to use a lot of different drum machines and a lot of different audio equipment, and they haven't gone through the gamut of all the different tools and whatnot, so they don't understand. Maybe there are some things that are missing. There are things that used to be in some of the equipment that no longer exist, and it does have an impact on what you can do. Now, of course, new technology brings a lot of new possibilities as well, but I think it's okay for an old head to really say this is missing this component musically. This is missing this component sonically. This is an important thing to point out, because let's not act like it's all the same. Let's not act like everything is at the same level or at the exact same parity as what it had or what we had years back. Things have changed. Things are different. The equipment is different. The build quality of things are different. This happens across like pretty much everything. Like the build quality of cars today, much different than the build quality of cars back in, the 70s, the 60s, the 50s. Build quality is different. Like, it's not deniable. Now, are there a whole bunch of new modern technologies and things that are more convenient in new cars? Absolutely. Like, do I want to just have an old car just to have an old car? No, I'm not a collector. Now, if I needed an old car for a very specific task, then I would go for that old car. But generally speaking, in my case, I don't have a need for an older car. But we're talking about cars here versus music, art. With art, you may want to use something older if you are going for a specific sound, or if you know a certain sound is more easily achieved with an older piece of gear, or something that is based or rooted in older platforms. You may want to go for that creatively. I think there's nothing wrong with making that decision creatively. Like I said in the last stream, like, as a artist, as someone that does art, if you're painting, you don't use the same brush for every type of painting. You don't use the same paint for every type of painting. As if you're doing video, you don't use the same lens for every type of video. You make decisions based upon what the actual art or the project is calling for in the end. So if that means you need to go for something vintage to get that sound, or to get that look, or to get that feel, it's okay. We do what we do on this channel just to inform and to assist music producers in making such decisions in the end. It is not out of hate. It is not out of jealousy. It is not out of trying to make you feel bad about what you own, what you paid good money for, and what you're working to refine your art and craft on. Because at the end of the day, if you have a modern drum machine like an MPC X, or or a Machine Plus, or MPC Live, or something like that, and that's what you're refining your craft on right now, that's perfectly fine to do so. Like I said, it's only a problem when you start to fool yourself into saying that you have everything and you're capable of doing every single sound out the box with that machine. Because I think without a reference point, you don't even know if you're getting close to that sound. And that's why we did these previous comparison tests, so that you can be very clear, like, just because something says it's the vintage mode or whatever, doesn't mean you're actually getting that sound. If we do a ABC comparison, you can very much see that, no, the vintage mode on this machine actually doesn't even sound anywhere near the actual sound of a vintage machine. And that's an important thing to know as a artist and creative. It's allowing you to now be a bit more intentional about why you're using a certain piece of equipment, or why you're using a modern tool versus a vintage tool. Vintage is not the only type of tool that you can use to make good music. Again, like if I felt that way, you would never see me use an iPad. I would just be like, that's off limits. I'm not using any iPads or anything like that. I wouldn't use VSTs for that matter. So I've kind of gone over my 30-minute mark already, but that's what I wanted to talk about today. I know I've been seeing a lot of y'all in the chat participating, so I appreciate y'all already. If you're getting value from this conversation, go ahead and hit the like button, share this live stream with your community as well, and let's get it in. I'll be talking for a little bit. We'll get it in for a little bit, but I appreciate y'all that have stopped by today to participate, y'all. So let me go to this chat. Let me acknowledge some folks in here. Yeah, y'all been saying a lot. Okay. Let's see here. DBIC. Yo, what's going on, DBIC? Appreciate you for participating here. He says some of the architects show love too. Yeah, some of the architects do show love. I would say I've met quite a few architects that show love and generally try to receive new music. And, I think all old heads aren't just looking to crap on new music. It's not like that at all. I do find some old heads try or are resistant to change. I'm not saying that all the new heads are super open to new sounds and whatnot. There's plenty of them that are just like, no, it's either, old school or nothing. And that's them. But I would say I've met a lot more people that also are interested in new sounds. And I always find myself having better conversations ultimately with those that are a bit more open-minded to what type of music they're listening to, and also what type of music they're being influenced by. Because I think those that continue to listen to new music continue to grow, and they widen their palette as a musician. And I think you find that they are way less judgmental in the end on newer music producers. I'm gonna acknowledge the super chat first. I appreciate the super chat here. Sire, what's going on with you? I appreciate you, fam. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you. Yes, sir. Let me see. DiBiase says, what made you make beats originally? I'm not sure if that's a question. But if that is a question, I'll just say DJ Premier. DJ Premier, like, as I was listening to DJ Premier music and I started to like really like musically understand what he was doing, like by listening to it, I could understand what he was doing technically to manipulate records and sounds and create melodies. I started to hear his chops a bit more clearly as I listened to it. Not because they were rough chops or anything like that. It's because the patterns and the things, the way it was sonically sounding, I could tell, okay, he's doing something. And I thought at the time he was doing it with turntables, the chopping part of it, not the scratch. Obviously the scratching part was done with turntables, but when I would hear his chops, like one of the ones, one of the tracks that really made me really understand what he was doing was it was a Bumpy Knuckles song called Part of My Life. So listening to that song, that's when I knew I wanted to make beats, because I was like, yo, like I understand that, and I want to do that. I want to be able to do that. So DJ Premier was one of the ones that really made it clear. I think before that, I also Daz kind of got me thinking about it. Daz Dillinger, talking about some of the stuff he was doing for Dog Pound back in like 97, 96. He would talk about it sometimes on the radio, like the drum machines and the keyboards and whatnot. And knowing his music and listening to his music and hearing him talk about that, I said, oh, okay. Yeah, so hearing producers kind of talk about some of their stuff as well got me inspired. So that's why I talk about music production too, just because I know that if the messages in the conversation gets to other people, it may inspire other people to want to look deeper into how the music is made in the end. So that's why I love talking about it, because I know that's what inspired me. That was one of the things that inspired me, was hearing producers talk about their craft and like the tools that they were using. And, you know, at that time, Daz was being very like high level generic, calling it drum machines and keyboards. So that kind of sent me out on a wild goose chase trying to figure out what drum machines and keyboards are you referring to, Daz? But, you know, that was part of the journey, and that's been part of the pursuit for me, is to figure that out. And, you know, I've done a decent job of figuring out some of that stuff, but I think it helps to talk to old heads if you can. I think you can cut to the chase quicker if you had questions about things. Like I always recommend people talk to an old head and get that perspective and see, like, you know, what do you think about this, or have you used this, or what should I do here? Like, talk to old heads. I have old heads that I can talk to about that as well. Folks that are older than me that just have more experience and I can talk to. You always got to have someone that's older, that's more experienced, that you can bounce ideas off of as well. And if they don't agree with everything that you're into, that's fine. Take the perspective and see how you can refine some of your thinking. Not say that you need to be a yes man to an older person just because they're older. You can have your own perspective as well, but definitely take the advice that you can and do what you can do with it, because it can save you a lot of time. Like, that's why I do what I do on this channel, to save people time and get them closer to like where they're trying to go. Black Sea Beats, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much, fam. Hey, bro, thanks for adding your bricks to the house of hip hop. You still look the same over the years. I appreciate you, fam. Thank you, man. I appreciate you. I done got a little bit older. I got a little bit of gray now, bro, but I appreciate you, fam. Thank you so much, man. Thank you for your support. You've definitely supported my platform for a long time, man. Definitely, man. I remember you bought one of my first True West t-shirts, man. So much respect, much love. I appreciate you, fam. Let's see here. Getting back into this chat. Knowledge says the sonics of hip hop will always change generationally, but hot is hot. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think hot is also subjective, because hot kind of refers to like popular in a way. Like hot is a colloquialism. It's something that can be used to say that something may be trending or something may be popular or exciting at the moment or just on fire with the masses. So that I think that also will change generationally. But I think I think at the end of the day, when we're comparing sonics, it is okay if we have a control of like a certain speaker set or whatever, and say, okay, if we play all of these different machines and all this different music on the same speakers, do they all hit the same? Do they all sound as clear? Which one's giving me the better bass response? Is this one muddier than the other one? I think that's a fair assessment if we listen to different music, different generations of music, different drum machines, etc., on the same speakers. If one music or if one sound is not sounding as good on that same pair of speakers, I think it's okay for you to say it doesn't sound good. I think, especially as a music producer, you should be able to say that doesn't sound good. Like when I listen to it on that set of speakers, doesn't work, it definitely doesn't sound as good as this other music. This other music sounds better. Now, could that mean that the other music, like the newer music or whatever, is tuned to like a different speaker set? Yep, absolutely. We said this before on another stream, like some of the productions out there are being created just to be optimized for the iPhone speaker, or just to be optimized for Beats by Dre headphones, or something else that may have some biases and some overhyped frequencies. So now if you're listening to that music that has been made to compensate for a iPhone speaker or Beats by Dre headphones, when you listen to that on some high-end monitors, it may not come across as good. It may not sound as good to you. It may be lacking frequencies, or it may have too much frequencies in certain spectrums and certain ranges. And you may feel like, well, I don't like it. It doesn't sound as good, because I think the reference point matters as well. Like, what did you make the music to be optimized for? And that's why I say, ultimately with music, when you're mixing music, you need to be mixing for a multitude of devices. Don't just focus on one device. Try to make sure that you get an even balance between all the devices, and the stuff that you want to be heard is audible on a large range of devices. Like, test a lot of devices. Have an A set, a B set, a C set of monitors. If you can have more, the more the merrier. But definitely test it out on as much stuff as you can. Yeah, so it's just, I think we have to be careful with how we judge this stuff as well, because we have to understand that some of the artists today are painting for a different medium. The speaker, in my opinion, is the main medium that a music producer is creating for, the speaker. But what speaker are we talking about is the question. I think the music that sounds the best usually fills out the speaker in a very dynamic and full way, where there's clarity, there's impact, and it triggers the listener or the end user emotionally based upon the way that the sound is being expressed across the speaker. If your music is not coming across the speaker with the level of authority and power and impact that you want, then you're not done musically. So I think that's what we're painting for, but some producers may have limited their canvas to being the iPhone speaker. So then they optimize only for that, and then it misses out on other opportunities for listeners that may have a better set of speakers. Like, if you're focused on the iPhone, and then, older heads may be, for example, more car listeners. That might be like one of their main places to enjoy music, right? And if you've optimized for the iPhone speaker, and then you say, okay, yeah, older head, listen to my stuff in your car, and now all of a sudden it's muddy, it sounds messy, and the car EQ is not enough to be able to make it sound good, the older head may not like the music. That's just, that's just how it is. Like, because you didn't play or create the art to satisfy the listening experience of the older head, now you kind of have this dilemma where older head may not like your stuff because it doesn't sound good on what they monitor on. Like, a lot of older people I know have high-end stereo systems and things in the house still, hi-fis as they're called. Yeah, a lot of younger heads that I've seen don't have hi-fi systems. They may have, a sound bar hooked up to the TV, and they may have some type of Bluetooth speaker, Bluetooth headphones. That might be how they're enjoying their music, like the majority of the time. Is that wrong that they enjoy it that way? No, I think it's fine that they want to enjoy it that way. But I think if you optimize the music for just like the Bluetooth speaker crowd and Bluetooth headphone crowd, then you miss out on the crowd that has the hi-fi system and, has been listening to a whole lot of music on that hi-fi system. And then when they play yours, it's like, oh, it's harsh, or, oh, it's muddy, or, oh, it's just like, I have to do so much to make that one feel good on my system now, where I may not even want to play it because it just doesn't hit the same way as the other music I've been playing on the same system. So we got to keep that in mind too. Let's see here. Now it says these kids now have such a huge advantage. Yep, that's real talk. Rufus Jackson, what's going on with you? My question is, can you get a true boom bap sound if you're a vinyl sampler from the MPC-X? Of course you can. I think boom bap is, obviously it's a sound, but I think it's also like a methodology and approach to creating music. So I think you can, number one, achieve the boom bap methodology of making beats on a lot of different samplers. So there's that. You can definitely approach making music like boom bap on an MPC-X. Now, if you incorporate sampling from records, you may also get closer to that sound. I think the difference is some of the frequencies that are prominent in boom bap may not be as strong or as prominent in the mix, like just out the gate with the MPC-X. And you may have to do additional work, additional mixing to make sure that you're hitting all the frequencies the way that traditional boom bap is being mixed. I think that's an important thing to consider, is just like your reference points at the end. Like, what are you referencing? What are you comparing your music to? We did the test already on the MPC-X, so you heard the differences. You heard that the mid-range on the MPC-X is not as strong. Some of the transients are not as apparent. Boom bap tends to be a bit more mid-range, some low end, but it's not like overpowering low end. It's definitely not super high end, like super crispy highs and all that stuff. It's not boom bap. So I think you can achieve what you're looking for if you understand the genre and you choose the sounds that are close to what you're going for, but also just knowing how to dial in the frequencies on the different sounds that you're using to make sure that they're cutting through in the way that you would like to hear them in the mix. Let me get to this. DJ Cool Breeze, man, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for the super chat, fam. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Appreciate you. Yes, sir. But yeah, you can achieve boom bap on anything, like any sampler. It's just your reference point. Like, do you have the right reference point for the music, and are you comparing it? And that this is why you use reference mixes. Like, pull up a reference mix and then make your mix try to sound competitive with that in some way. Like that's the challenge as a music producer. I think we still have to look at music production as a competitive art form. Hip hop especially is a competitive art form. Let's not get it twisted. Hip hop is competitive. Without the competitive part of hip hop, I think we have a different genre and different culture. Like, well, what is b-boying without competition? What is battle rapping without competition? Hip hop incorporates a competitive spirit. I think music production, professional music production, is competitive as well. Like, pop producers are always comparing their mixes and stuff and always like trying to beat the latest pop, charting single or whatever. Professional music is competitive, but I would say definitely hip hop is competitive. So you must compare yourself in some way and see if you're at the same standard or exceeding the standard that may be set by a benchmark that you may have, or something that you're using to compete with in your own studio. I think it's okay to do so. I don't think you're looking to try to sound like someone just because you pull up their mix and see how your mix is faring out against theirs. I think that's a smart thing. It's a strategic thing, and it will help you to become better at what you do at the end, because it'll make sure that you're not just living in your own bubble, but you're now looking at, how does my stuff stand up against the rest of the world, or something that has hit a high level or high standard of quality. Let me get back to this chat here. The Bronze Yog, Bronze Yog report, because we don't always rock with FL Studio beats. I mean, FL Studio is just a doll, man. I think when we say FL Studio, I mean, we've been having this discussion for a long time. I think when we say FL Studio, realistically, I think FL Studio got a bad name because that's where a lot of music producers of younger generations got to start making music. And of course, you're going to hear bad beats from someone that's just starting out, right? I mean, that's just, listen, if you started out on the MPC 2000 XL, that was your first drum machine, you never did anything else, you never had anything else, and you just started making beats, and that was what you started with. I guarantee you're gonna have some whack beats on the 2000 XL or whatever it is. You're gonna have some whack beats there. That's just the nature of just starting off in any art form. Like, you're not gonna be DJ Premier when you just started off. Like, it's just not going to happen like that. So with FL Studio, or Fruity Loops as it used to be called, a lot of people started there, and you heard a lot of early beats, first year of beats, second year of beats. A lot of those aren't great, especially if they haven't had a lot of music experience and whatnot, engineering experience. You're going to hear a lot of bad stuff. So I think FL specifically got a bad name because a lot of younger producers started there, and you're hearing a lot of their first beats from there. I think obviously artists like Knife Wonder and Hit Boy, Boy Wonder, so there's so many like Sunny Digital, Um, I can name a lot of FL producers. FL is not the problem. I think experience and expertise are the problem in the end. That's what creates a lot of whack beats. It's just that. It's not necessarily the gear, it's just the mastery of the craft in the end. And I think you got to spend the 10,000 hours in whatever you're using. It can't just be like, hey, like, yeah, I just make beats every once in a while and I expect to be at the same level as the top producers in the game. Not happening. You got to spend the time, you got to put the work in, and you got to like really care about the craft in order for you to get better. And I think comparing yourself and doing the comparisons, referencing and trying to get your mixes and trying to get your stuff at a level where it sounds competitive is part of that craft as well. Let's see, since 85, I think it's just too easy for these young cats and you had to pay to play for admission back in the day. It's true. It's true. But I think, listen, even though it's too easy, I think it was less, back in the day, was less people doing it as well. And so I think a lot of not so great producers also could get heard and seen quicker if they had access and just had equipment. You know, if they had the ability to produce music and get it to other people, you could get heard easier because it just was less competition out there. So if you were that guy that made beats around the neighborhood, even if they weren't like amazing, you were the guy to make beats in that neighborhood. You're the one that has the equipment. You're the one that has the mic. You're the one that has the know how to do more than the rappers and the people and the singers and the people that you're working with in your community. So of course, like, you know, back in the day, you may have been able to get away with a lot of like inferior stuff just by virtue of just being the first to have the tools. So I think it's, you know, trade-offs in all the generations. I don't fault the younger producers for having the ease of making beats, because it's definitely more competitive for them today as far as like putting their music out there. There's so many more producers out there, and I think the standards are high because like the tools enable you to do so much more. So like you're competing with a lot more. So I think the type of competition that exists changed, and a lot of producers now that are younger recognize like I'm not just competing for dominance and like I'm not just competing for mastery of the beat part of it, because that's not making the best beats doesn't get them heard necessarily today. It's only one part of it. You know, a lot of it is like, am I likable? Am I popular? Do people mess with me? Can I get in front of an audience? So there's a lot of that going on too. So I think younger producers today are playing a different game. Like they're playing with social media and all this stuff. So they have to be good at a lot of things that older heads didn't have to be good at. So imagine, you know, now the younger producer that has to be good at making TikToks and, you know, that sort of thing, and also has to be good at making beats, and also has to be good at filming themselves, and also has to be good at all these other things that are not necessarily making music, compared to like back in the day where it was like, well, I just need to be good at my, you know, drum machine and, you know, put it on tape and send it to one of my boys that works at, you know, blah, blah, blah. Or I know a cat that's engineering or interning here and he can get it to this record label. That was kind of how it was back in the day. You didn't have to do all this other stuff that younger music producers have to do. So I think that has to be considered as well. It's not the same game anymore. So as much as we may miss the old day of just being able to be the producer in the studio and just make the music and, you know, produce the record or whatever, the younger producer doesn't have that luxury. A lot of times the artists that they're working with don't even want to record with them. You know, imagine that. Imagine most of the artists today that a lot of these younger producers have to deal with don't even want the producer in the studio, because they're killing the vibe or whatever. You know, I've heard this stuff before from producers and artists. Like, man, they didn't even want the producer in there because I was killing the vibe or whatever. They're playing a different game. So how can a producer of today really compete if the game is not just like sing your beats out and get a placement? The game is like I have to navigate a lot of different terrain that older producers never had to navigate, and I have to be proficient in a lot of these things. So I have to learn a lot of stuff really quickly to be able to call myself a producer today. So maybe I don't have hours and days to spend on a beat when the beat alone is not going to get me the opportunity. It's the beat plus I got to get a viral moment on my TikTok, or I got to do a collab with someone on this platform. It's a lot of that going on too. So that's why I say this. It's not about hate here. I think we just have to consider that different generations also have different obstacles and different criteria for success at this point. So your criteria for success may be different than someone that is 10, 20 years younger than you. All right. Let's see here. Y'all been going crazy in the chat. I appreciate y'all. It's a lot of interesting stuff in here. DBIC says, I can honestly say making beats gave me something to get hyper focused and stay put in the house instead of getting caught up with the wrong crowd, and Watts basically saved, I think. Yeah, no, I could see that. I could definitely see that, especially growing up in Watts. Plenty of other activity to get into in Watts, California. Trust me, I know. Yeah, music saved a lot of people. I think music saved a lot of people, and I think that's an important thing. Like, just to being able to find that creative outlet to be able to like focus and hone in on, instead of being kind of focused on these relationships and being accepted outside. I think, yeah, for me, music saved me from going down different paths as well, and I definitely appreciate that, because otherwise, yeah, it's easy to get caught up in like, yeah, the homies is over there doing X, Y, Z, like, yeah, whatever it is. I didn't have time for that because, yeah, like, I didn't want to go out. I want to work on music, or I want to listen to music, or I want to do something else. And I mean, yeah, music is a super important outlet still, and that's why. Like I said, this is why I have this platform now, because I think what it's done for me in my life, and just how it's improved like my overall quality of life, and all the opportunities and experiences I've had. I don't take it for granted, and I think I just want to share that and provide that experience, but also provide that inspiration to others that are coming after me, so that they can continue to be inspired and also create and add to the culture and add their bricks to hip hop as well, or whatever genre of music. Because it's not just about hip hop, and I'm not just a hip hop musician. I consider myself an electronic musician. I also do hip hop, but I consider myself more of an electronic musician in the end. But I think hip hop is a fundamental part of what I do. So I definitely consider myself part of hip hop, but I'm not only hip hop. Hoodie Beats, technology is the big part. Majority of the new beat makers couldn't play a chord or bass line without drawing it in. No, this just fact. Sure, that's true. I mean, listen, that's been said about almost every new generation that has had access to technology. When some of the pioneers in hip hop were coming into the whole like sampling age of hip hop, because of course, we don't have to get into that whole rabbit hole, but hip hop wasn't always just sampling or chopping records, I should say. Hip hop wasn't always that, and we can obviously see that early hip hop production definitely there was not so much just chopping records. It was definitely a lot of keyboards and live instrumentation as well in early hip hop. But when the sampler generation came, where they were chopping and looping samples and whatnot, there were older heads at that time that said these guys don't play music either. They're just they're just stealing records and playing them back and, just looping them. So you can always say that about like people that use technology in a certain way. I think over time, art forms are refined and people get more creative with how they approach using technology. So the early days of sampling may not sound like the era of sampling where you had producers like Pete Rock and DJ Premier and Jay Dilla and Eric Sermon and DJ Quick and DJ Battlecat and the people that were using SP1200s and doing things that required a bit more skill. Or we can get into even before them, like my boys, good friends, the Shockley brothers, Keith and Hank, the Bomb Squad. What the Bomb Squad was doing musically with sampling, very much artistic and creative. This wall of sound approach to sampling. It's a refined form of sampling that they really pioneered. I think you have to say that there's art to that. You have to say that there is some type of methodology and technique to what they were doing to make even danceable records, but also incorporate this sampling approach and using samples that may come from different records and may also have some tonal clashing going on, but still happens to work. I think there is some method to that madness as well. And I've definitely had conversations with Hank Shockley and Keith about this, but I'm sure there were older heads that also accused them of not being capable musically because of what they were doing. But that's just a perspective. I think the art, like I said, it gets refined and people start to like push the boundaries. And at some point with the technology, you start to see the refinement of the art and it turns into something that is highly skillful in the end. We can't say that just because someone is using technology that there's no skill involved. There are different skills involved. And ultimately, we have to respect that there are different skill sets that come from using technology. And that's always going to be the distinction between someone that's like just mediocre with the art form versus someone that is very skillful and very intentional. And I think that comes with refinement. So we also have to understand this is going to come over time. Like with any technology, you're going to see that people are going to hone the craft and like drive the technology in a skillful way where you start to see like they're very intentional about what they're doing and it makes sense and they're consistent about it and it actually has an impact on people. It's reaching who it needs to reach. I think that's important. Let's see here. Josso says facts, but that's everything. Like technology moving away from hardware, so much assistance in everything you do. But I look at it like sports and nutrition. MJ with modern medicine, exactly. Any craft, any skill set, any area of activity can be refined and improved with information, technology, and that's happening in the arts. It's happening in sports, obviously, like modern medicine, modern nutrition, just the overall better understanding of physiology and health allows athletes to be a bit more performant. Like, look at how long LeBron James is able to play right now. LeBron James is able to play at a high level for an extremely long time. And a lot of that has to do with information and just advancements in technology and understanding. And he uses a lot of that. I've heard he spends millions of dollars on his health yearly to keep himself in tip-top condition. So That's something that this generation has access to that the previous generation didn't have access to because they didn't have the information, they didn't have the technology. So I think it's okay to embrace technology and assist, use it for refining what you do as a creative and as a professional in the end. Let's see here. Bronze Yoke says, I won't even get FL Studio because my old school mind. Give me Studio One Reason or some kind of hardware. Word. I mean, I'd say it's worth checking out FL just to have a perspective and understand what is possible there. Because as a creative, you can use the tool and figure out different ways to make it make sense for you. I would say don't avoid it just because it has a negative stigma associated with people that are just starting out in music. I think that's kind of crazy actually to like avoid it just because that's where a lot of people start because they're cracking the software or whatever. It's a creative tool, so you can use it creatively. You can use your creative mind to figure out how you can leverage it and figure out if it can make sense for any of the production you're trying to do. But to avoid it just because, I don't advise that for anybody. Knowledge says making beats is therapeutic whether you blow or not. I'd say don't waste time on jealousy, just love the crowd. Word. Yep, I agree. DiBiase, the old head don't have to churn butter forever. Look at Ski Beats, for example. He stayed learning new gear and from the SP1200 S950 era. Yeah, Ski Beats is one of those guys for sure that has embraced technology. He was one of the early people we were working with on Machine. I remember that. But he's always been exploring new tech, and he's not afraid to try new stuff out. And I think he's definitely one of those guys that came up on that SP1200 S950, and I mean he knows the difference. I've talked to him about that. He's talked to me about like, yeah, man, if you really want to get the sound of this, get this sampler. He's giving me some game on that. So he knows the difference, but I think that just because he knows that certain samplers sound different, that's not stopping him from using the MPC Live and other things. Like he's still using that as well. So I think as a craftsman, you should know your tools and you should know what sounds different and how different things work. Don't be afraid of using new technology just because it's new. Don't avoid it just because, like it may do different things or may not behave the same way old equipment does. That's not the point of these. It's just really the point of these conversations and these different shootouts is really just to inform so that you know the differences. So you don't say, yeah, just do this and just do that. And it's the same thing. Like it's not, and we've proven that it's not, but I would say that doesn't mean avoid old tech or new technology just because it's not the same as the old. That's crazy too. That's never been the point of this whole discussion. Hoodie B says, if you're a new producer today and you're feeling yourself, don't, because all the tools now basically do the work for you. I mean, listen, I think, like I said, the newer producers have a lot of different things that they have to be good at. So it's fine if they like what they're doing. I think, yes, you should be careful not to consider yourself, if you're a chef, if you're comparing, if you do most of your meals via air fryer, it's kind of hard for you to compare yourself to someone that, knows how to fry chicken traditionally. They got the cast iron skillet or, whatever your frying medium is of choice, and they know how to do that, and they're dealing with a deep brine and marination process that the air fry cook doesn't really do. The air fryer chef may like the food that they're making, and it may fill them and satisfy them, and they might be able to feed it to others, and It works, but it's not the same level of quality in food, and like maybe the richness of the flavors may not be as apparent in the air fry as it would be on a traditional fry. So, I mean, I think that being said, there's something for everybody out there. Um, I don't tend to like a lot of microwave food. Not that I don't eat any microwave food. I definitely eat some microwave food. But I don't I don't go out my way to try to eat microwave food if I have an opportunity to have some home cooking, something that takes a little bit longer. I think for me, because I like the flavors and I like the textures and things that come with like cooking things the traditional way, I prefer that process. Like, yeah, don't put my stuff in the microwave, even on the reheat. I'm that type of person. Even on the reheat, obviously, if I don't have time to, reheat in the oven or reheat on the stove top or something like that, then I got to go in the microwave. But even on the reheat, I tend to like, put my stuff in the oven. If I don't have to eat right now and you're reheating, I'll reheat in the oven because I know like that microwave is going to change the texture. And it's the same thing with music. Like that microwave beat is going to change the texture as well. And, if you're okay with that, then cool. I'm not always okay with that. I like the texture of the slow cooked meal in the end. It's better, and the flavors are richer and more well preserved than, you know, putting it in the microwave for a minute and a half. And, if it dries out or if it gets hard or if it gets mushy or whatever, cool. Like that's not cool for me. So that's my perspective. But I think, today's producer also, like I said, has to do a lot of things. So I think for them, the craft in a lot of cases is not just being a music producer traditionally, but a lot of people that are competing today have to figure out how to be influencers and have to figure out how to be seen. So like the craft is like all these things, like it's the music, it's the visuals that they're doing, it's a lot of stuff. So I think the economy also has transformed the perspective that the modern producer has today versus the older producer that may just be locked into like, I'm about the music and producing records because that's what I care about, not so much like all the other stuff that's going on today. Let's see here. Josol says an old head that had to learn the hard way that embraced and mastered modern tech would probably be better, as that is true evolution. Exactly. All Star says I was about to say machines making music now, dudes just got fingers nearby. Oh man, y'all going hard on that. I mean, in some cases that's true. Obviously, I don't think it's that way for everybody. I mean, I've seen some producers in FL that have a high level of mastery and like really know all the key commands and can like really make music quickly based upon the technology. And it's not because they don't know intentionally what they're doing and it's just being done for them. Like I've watched, and I keep forgetting this kid's name, but there's this kid out there that's making beats like in a minute 30, 2 minutes. And it's with intentionality. He's doing it very intentional and he's flying through making it because all of the key commands are enabling him to do it intentionally. He's not coming up with random anything. He has a reference point. He knows what he's going for, and he's actually like recreating beats in FL Studio in a minute and 30 seconds. I've seen him do it. I would say that the beat is not being made for him. The technology is enabling him to do it very quickly. He doesn't have to do as much stuff as you would have to do traditionally on a hardware device where there doesn't exist all these different macros and key commands and things that you can press to to do simple tasks. Like, I think we got to understand the difference. There's a difference between a program making the music for you versus a program having a lot more tools and maybe macros that can do several complex steps in one key command. That's a totally different thing. And I think there's nothing wrong with using macros and key commands that perform a lot of like simple, tedious tasks quickly in one strike. So that's just my perspective. Let's see here. Old crew had to work hard AF compared to today's flow. For sure, for sure. Knowledge, having access to the tools early is just a huge to the younger generation. Them being able to figure out their sound earlier, their relationship with Sonics, the journey of creator is so awesome. Yeah, I think it's dope that musicians today can learn this earlier and like really start to refine their craft, you know, in their preteens. People are doing it in their preteens. I think that's amazing. So I think that's a nod to technology. Technology enables them to do that. Like, they don't have to have $1 million studio to get access to all these tools and learn all these different techniques. So I think it's fine. It's fine that we have all this technology. I think you're still, as a craftsman, as someone that cares about your craft, you can still choose to make music however you want. You could choose to use whatever tools you want and whatever processes you want, because it's your art form in the end. It's your craft. Let me see here. Let's see. Since 85 says, at the end of the day, hip hop was built off using what you have, and I have no animosity towards anyone on how they get busy, just different times, man. Music is constantly evolving. Agreed, agreed. DBIC says, Voltron, the new and old technology. Yep, I agree. Styles Track says, it's in the ear, not the ear. Yeah, I think it is in the ear. And just to that point, I do still think that saying it's in the ear is part of it, but the ear can only hear what the speaker is providing them in the end. You can't hear stuff that the speaker's not giving you. And we do have to like take a step back and say, do we have our listening environment at a level where we can hear the stuff that we need to hear? I think a lot of speakers today are not made at the same technical spec and same quality that older hi-fi speakers were. So like a music producer back in the day that may have had a hi-fi system, like a hi-fi system with with their turntables and stuff hooked up to it, and we're listening to their music on that, may have a different listening experience than someone that is mainly based upon their laptop speakers and maybe some Bluetooth speakers. Like their listening experience is going to be different. So like the way they hear music and mix music will be different. So I think it's important to make sure that you do have a good listening, a good listening environment, and also good speakers to hear your music on. Because I do think that is an advantage of some of the older producers, is that just because of the era they came up in, the standard speakers that they probably would have listened to music on were going to be better than a lot of the new stuff. And that's just how it was. Like growing up in a lot of houses in LA, especially, there were big hi-fi systems. People had huge systems in the house, and the listening experience was superb. So I think that impacts what you hear and how you enjoy music in the end. So I think it is important to make sure that, like, yes, it is your ear, but make sure you have a good set of cans or whatever you're going to listen on. Just make sure it's good in the end. I think that don't skimp on that part, because I think we start to lose the plot when we start to skimp on like what we're listening to music on, especially if we love music. If you say you love music, but you don't have like something quality to listen to music on, I question how much you really love music, to be honest. I think it starts with like listening. Like it definitely starts with listening to music. Like the whole I'm a music producer. I don't know how you can be a music producer without actually having fell in love with listening to just the music. Um, and I don't know how you can say that you love listening to music and not get more excited about like, oh, I want to hear it even better, and I want to hear more of the sounds and more of the frequencies. So let me get better speakers and let me get a better situation to listen to music on. I don't understand how that could get lost if we're music producers that love music. I think the speakers are definitely like one of the most important parts of being a music recording artist today, is like being able to hear it and enjoy music, enjoy listening to your own music, but also enjoy listening to music made by others, people that inspired you to start making music. So it is the ear. Since it is the ear, make sure that you also focus on your speakers. Get your speaker game up. I think a lot of music producers especially got to get their speaker game up more than your drum machine, more than your sampler, more than your DAW. Get your speaker game up so you can listen to stuff and like actually hear how music can be expressed across different canvases, different speakers. Like that's super important. Um, let's see here. Knife Wonder using the machine. Yep. Movement Up says, bro, that thumbnail is hilarious. Geriatric beats. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's how a lot of old heads are perceived, like just angry, um, still making geriatric beats, still making old school 90s, 80s beats that nobody cares about, quote unquote. I think that's the perception when some old heads are talking about music, but I don't think it's like that across the board. I think a lot of old heads actually care about just music and want to provide their perspective, and I think that's okay. But yeah, thanks for the. I'm glad you appreciate the thumbnail there. Let's see here. The rabbit hole was It was much easier these days, but people gotta deep dive less. It was the deep diving that makes the artist perform art. Yeah, I think, like I said, a lot of it, a lot of musicians today don't necessarily focus on refining just the music, and they're not necessarily digging for something deep. They want to have music as a part of something else that they're doing creatively. So the depth is not necessarily there because maybe their audience is not necessarily only listening to music. They may also be consuming content that is visual and other things, like other types of medium that could also incorporate music. So the music might be one aspect of it. Because you got to think like there's no like prominent record stores across the nation anymore in the US. So people aren't just going out like, let me just go buy music. Now, people do go to concerts, people go to clubs, people go to live events, but the intentionality of just like, oh, I'm just going to go buy music to just go listen to it, I think a lot of that is done. Like, of course, there are people still buying CDs, buying vinyl, whatever. I would say that that's more of a niche crowd. That's a niche audience that is like super into like the idea of having physical records. But generally speaking, people like to enjoy music as maybe a part of a different experience altogether. So like, yeah, the deep dive may not be as important for them in what they're doing creatively. that's just, that's just a matter of like where that person is artistically or creatively, what is required for them to achieve what they're looking for in music or in the creative arts for that matter. It's not just music. That's the point. Like sometimes the deep dive is not the focal point of the art form anymore because their audience is not just listening to music. Let's see here. Quiet as kept for me. The biggest leap in technology was storage. Yeah, that's a big one. Like, listen, coming from having floppy disk to having, SSDs with 4 terabytes plus. Like, yeah, that's a huge leap. Storage and RAM, yeah, huge leaps, huge leaps. Of course, processing power is out of this world right now. But yeah, storage was a big one. Which is why I understand why some of you guys prefer, like, man, just give me an XSE, because internal storage plus like SD cards with 128 gigabytes or whatever. What are we talking about? Like, so you want me to go use a MPC 60 with a floppy disk compared to what I could do on the XSE? I get it. I get that. I understand there are many technological advantages of using an older device or a newer device, I should say. There's many technological advances that come with like saying, hey, I can make the whole beat here and store everything on this MPC XSE. Doesn't require me to store it across multiple floppy disks. Like I don't have to like, oh, let me load in floppy disk 1, floppy disk number 2 to get all the sounds and load up the beat. It's nothing like that. And if you ever use a floppy drive, it's like, well, it's not really a fast process at all. It's very slow. So I think the storage is a big deal. I think that can't be understated here, or it can't be overstated really, because yeah, the storage part, like having had like, even I remember when we went from the floppy to the zip, that was a big deal. Like having like a SCSI drive or something like that, SCSI zip drive, and being able to hook that up, and now I can save my beats on the SCSI drive versus the floppy drive. It was a big deal. And then going from that to now, like, oh, well, not now, but going from the SCSI floppy drive to, oh, now the MPC has like a compact flash drive. When I got the MPC 1000, they had the compact flash drives, and it was like, that's a big advancement, because now, like, instead of having all these different zips, I can have one compact flash card that basically is larger than multiple zips. Like, so storage is a big game changer. Let's see here. Knowledge says, I think the truest definition of a producer is someone with a good ear for music. How you get there is irrelevant. Lays and Beats, yes sir. West Coast Bounce, yes sir. Black Seas has salute. I was rewatching your 2008 NAMM video. Yeah, man. That 2008 was probably one of the last great NAMMs. 2008, 2009, those were some really good ones. Yeah, that's crazy. I have, have quite a bit of old footage from NAMM. But yeah, 2008 NAMM was fun. I think my favorite NAMM that I went to was probably 2000, either 7 or 8. I think either one of those were super good for me. I've been going to NAMM since 2005. 2005. Knowledge. I'm loving how we are getting different flavors in hip hop. Yep. DBIC. But the old head term is funny. I was getting called old by someone 34, like your 40s is around the corner, bruh. That's always hilarious when somebody that's like not so young in the end is calling you an old head. Like, oh, you an old head. Like, dude, you listen, by today's standards, if you're in your 30s, you are already an old head in music production, because music producers are starting in their pre-teens now. You can If you got access to a laptop and can download FL, there's music producers that are in their, 8, 9, 10, 11 preteens, like making music. So a 34-year-old is definitely an old head. That's that's a trip, but that's how it is now. Like, it didn't used to be like that, but I think technology allows people to start earlier. So yeah, like a younger producer like that, like a younger producer from back in the day could have still been like in their 30s, but 34 to me, definitely, like I said, I've been an old head for over a decade already. No question about that. Let's see here. NPC Canvas, what's going on with you, fam? Tony Anthems, what's going on with you, fam? Sir Swiftus W. Funkleworth. Sounds like a Parliament Funkadelic, Parliament Funkadelic character right here. Like that name. As a veteran musician, composer, producer, mastering, and mixing engineer, I have a disdain for those who rely only on the sample they chose instead of making their own sound from those samples. I think different approaches for different art and creative approaches. I understand why you would maybe prefer certain things, but I do appreciate an artist that can find a loop that maybe someone was not thinking about to use for a hip hop song. Like, I love Madlib, for example. Madlib was one of the producers that definitely inspired me to do stuff. And I love the Yesterday's new quintet project. Like, that's one of my favorite projects of all time. Angles Without Edges, one of my favorite albums from a hip hop producer. But Madlib is known as the loop digger. And Madlib has made a career of finding some unorthodox loops and making it sound crazy. I think one of my favorite Madlib productions is Official, off of the J-Lib project. That sample, it's a loop, but golly. I put that loop on and that immediately puts me in a very good mood. That is such a fire track for me. It's very simple, but that loop is infectious. That loop is doing something. And the fact that he heard that in that context with that swing and that bounce, there's an art to that. Not everybody can do that. I guarantee you not everybody could find that loop and make it bounce like that and make it feel like that as a rap song. Because if that was the case, it would have been done before. It would have been done at that same level where, like, it just sounded like that. Like, if you've never heard that song, like, listen to that song, Official by J-Lib. Madlib produced it. It's a loop. Like, I've heard the loop because, like, it's so interesting that loop is the same loop that Jay Dilla used on a very famous song as well. And it's like, Jay Dilla didn't use that part, he used the other part. So it's like, the fact that Madlib used that part and it's like, yo, he killed it with just the loop. I think there is something special to loops. There's an art form to looping. There's an art form to hearing loops and being able to make it into something that can be listened to over 2 to 4 minutes. I think not every loop can do that. You have to have a certain ear to be able to choose a loop that can actually work over 4 minutes. It's just real. So I get what you're saying, but I don't have a disdain. I think with the art form, you have to have mastery at what you're doing. You can't just be picking loops and saying, yeah, that's what I just do loops. Like, not all loops are hot enough for you to actually be able to pull it off over a 4-minute track, period. Let's see here. DiBiase says at one point that golden era music was considered younger generation and the artist they sample gave them resistance. Exactly, exactly. So it's always a cycle. It's always going to be an older generation that feels like the younger guys aren't doing the same thing that the new guy, that the older guys are doing. Like the older guys are gonna say, "Oh, you don't do it this way. You don't use this. You don't make your stuff that way." Like, there's always gonna be that. Um, but I think there's art in using technology, and there's art in finding new ways to express. I think we just got to find the art in the end. I think just because somebody does it differently doesn't mean it's not artistic or creative. I think not everybody that uses technology is being artistic or creative though. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of people that don't do anything creative and just copy. Just like, all right, I just copied somebody else's style, and I just copied somebody else's sound, and I just copied, somebody else's melodies, and I just copied, there's a lot of that too. Um, but my perspective is not that like using technology, using loops or using samples is like not creative. I think it's about how they're used and like what level of mastery is being used that kind of determines or differentiates someone that's just like not creative versus someone that's super creative and super inventive with like their approach to music. Sir Swiftest Funkleworth says musicians play instruments that y'all get those samples from, and they don't give proper compensation. Now that part, I mean, that's a whole different topic. I think to your point there's opportunities for us to work with older musicians, and I think that should be incorporated into hip hop. I think sampling is one way to bring those musicians to the light and like kind of revitalize what they're doing. I think that was George Clinton's perspective. He liked sampling because he saw what it was doing and how it was bringing new generations closer to his music and like establishing new connections with like generations his music wasn't reaching at that time. I just think, yes, to your point, we do have to. I think we do have to make that connection though, like to just kind of put ourselves in front of it and say, well, it's my music now. It's not the person that like actually recorded the music and played the original parts and all that stuff. It's not theirs. It's mine now because I put some new drums on top of it and rapped on it. Like it's mine. Like that's crazy too. I think we got to find ways to actually bridge the gap and also give the props and respect to the people that came before that actually laid the foundation. I think that's very important. Without that, we're kind of killing our own culture at that point. Let's see here. Black Seed Beat says, bro, I could care less about being referred to as an old head. I'm a combat veteran. I praise God. I'm still able-bodied. Yeah, I praise God for that too, bro. Thank you for your service, fam. Much appreciated. Salute to you. But yeah, I mean, old head is just a term. I think it's a term that gets used to kind of diminish the value of people that have been around longer and kind of like diminishes their relevance in a way like, oh, you're an old head. Like you're not hip. You're not doing what the new kids are doing. So I think that is used as a derogatory term. It's used to like discount and really disregard what's being said as being something that's not relevant to today's standard. But I don't have a problem with being called an old head because, listen, I grew up in Los Angeles County. A lot of my friends that I grew up with and went to middle school, elementary school with, and whatever, didn't make it past 30 years old. I know plenty of people that just didn't make it past 30 years old for whatever reasons, right? Kids I grew up with, like, spent young birthdays with, and I got pictures of them, when we were 6, 7 years old, and due to gang violence and other stuff, they are no longer here. So I don't I don't have a problem being called an old head. I think it's an honor to be able to have existed here 40 years plus, and also to have had the impact that I've been able to have with music production and sound and whatnot. I'm okay with being an old head. And I think a lot of older heads should also be okay with being old heads, because it's actually an honor and a blessing to be able to make it into like a older age when so many people are dying young and not being able to realize their potential past their 20s. I don't want the pinnacle of my life to have been my 20s. I think I have way more to offer today. To be honest, I have way more, like with the experience and the wisdom that I have today, and the skill set that I have today. I feel like I have better stuff to offer today than I could have when I was in my 20s. And that's how you should feel as an old head. I think if you're continuing to grow, if you're continuing to like progress, you should have more today to like provide and more value to give today than you had when you were in your 20s. Now there are like 20-year-olds that really have a lot of like wisdom and skill, and they've been able to like come out with a lot of interesting perspective and things like at a young age. You know, Tupac is one of those that comes to mind when I think about that. Like just the stuff he was talking about in his 20s is like, wow. He had a lot to say. He had a lot of formed opinions at a very young age. Now, were all of those opinions well formed from Tupac? Not necessarily. He was, he died in his mid-20s. So he hadn't experienced enough life to really like have the wisdom to know like some of the perspectives he had may not have been fully formed or well thought out. One example of that, I think, one of his perspectives he had on MC Hammer back in the day. I think it was a malformed opinion at that time about what MC Hammer was doing to the culture of hip hop. I think now, if you look back at what Hammer was really doing, I don't think that Tupac was right to say that Hammer was a coon or doing all this other stuff that was basically disrespecting the culture. I think Hammer was doing a lot to uplift the culture. He brought a lot of people from his neighborhood into a better place where they could actually live a better life and not get caught up in gang violence and other things. So, he was doing a lot of the stuff that people like Nipsey Hussle get credit for doing in the past few years or decade or whatever. MC Hammer was doing a lot of that stuff, like uplifting his hood and making sure that people were fed and could provide for themselves. He was doing a lot of that before like that was a thing, really. So I think the perspective that young Tupac may have had on Hammer back then, that's just one example of him not necessarily having lived long enough to really have a true wise perspective on what was going on at that time. I think he may have just had a visceral response to like, I don't like how this looks and I don't like the optics of this right now because whatever. And also thought it was a little hypocritical of Pac. Like I'm a big Tupac fan, but I think his perspective of that was hypocritical, considering he came up as a dancer with Digital Underground. So it's like, well, how can you have a perspective that one of the best performers in hip hop that we've ever seen, like one of the best live performers that we've ever seen in hip hop, is now somehow a coon because what? Because he's getting accolades and he's selling millions of records and he happened to have cross-cultural boundaries with his hip hop, and he's doing something that has never been done in hip hop. So that makes him a bad person now. I thought that was a malformed opinion from someone that also came up with a Bay Area based crew as a dancer. So I think there might have been more to that. But anyhow, I think it's okay to be an old head. I think with old age, you get more wisdom, more perspective, and you can have a little bit more, just a little bit more wise perspective to bring. And when you share your thoughts now, it comes with a little bit more life experience and not just like feeling and emotions. Let's see here. Since 8 says, for real, everyone eventually becomes an old head if you're lucky. Hip hop, the only genre with ageism, people get better at their craft with time. Absolute facts right there. If you are a person that is a craftsman and you're into craftsmanship and you're into refining your skill set, you should be getting better with age. I mean, if you're rapping, your pen, if you're continuing to read and continuing to expand your vocabulary and continuing to practice like how you deliver your songs and deliver your voice, you should all that should be refined as you get older in age, and you should get better with age. I was just listening to like the Lady of Rage actually. And I think she's very slept on as a MC. I think she was one of the best. She's been one of the best female rappers that we've ever had. But I think she stands out as just like a very powerful rapper. And I was listening to her introduction on the Snoop Dogg Doggy Style record that she kicks off. And she was incredible on that. But then I listened to her recently on this year's Dog Pound album, We All We Got, on Who the Hardest. And I said, I listened to her, like her bars and the way her pen, where her pen is at now. And I said, well, no, she's definitely still practicing her craft. And you can tell by like what she's saying and how she's saying it, and like the way she's manipulating the different words and stuff. It's like, no, she's a craftsman still, and she's still refining her craft, and her pen has actually gotten better now since Afro Puffs and the G-Funk introduction. I think she's gotten better. I think on that particular song, on the new Dog Pound album, Rage out-rapped everybody else on the Dog Pound. She out-rapped Corrupt, she out-rapped Dash, she definitely out-rapped Snoop, and she out-rapped RBX. Rage is definitely still refining her craft. So I thought, that was interesting, and it was inspiring to see, like, man, like, wow, that's impressive. She's actually really good now. Like, she was always good, but she's really good now. And I think that's how it should be when you get older. You should be getting better. Like, producers should be getting better. Like, you should be like refining to a point where the stuff that you hear now is just like leagues beyond what you heard when you were in your 20s. And your playing abilities and your engineering abilities and all that stuff. I always compare myself to my old self and to see where I'm at. And I'm like, yo, I listened to music from 20 years ago and I'm like, nah, the music I'm doing now, not the music I was doing 20 years ago. Like, not to say the music I was doing 20 years ago is bad, because I was doing good music 20 years ago. The music I'm doing now is where it's at. I'm better. I'm better than when I was 20. I promise you. I'm much better than when I was 20. So that's how it should be. And I think the ageism in hip hop has to stop, because we're killing our culture by not allowing ourselves to see the progression of an artist, and not allowing us to have a long span in music. When we start saying, oh, you old head, hip hop is a young man's sport. Hip hop is not a young man's sport. Hip hop, like, what is a young man's sport is clubbing. I would say going to the club and being like, you know, being a follower of trends. Those are young man sports. Hip hop is not a young man sport. Hip hop is for everybody, and we got to give ourselves the latitude to be able to do hip hop in old age. So we got to stop this. We have to stop saying, as people that participate in hip hop, that it is a young man sport. It is a sport that can be refined, and it doesn't require us to have young knees and all this other stuff that comes with different sports and activities. Like, I think your listening abilities should improve, like how you hear music. Your ability to discern different sounds can improve with your experience. Your ability to mix and record should improve with experience. Your ability to play your instruments can definitely improve with like age. There is no reason for us to limit hip hop or any music genre to being a young man sport when all of these things can improve over time. We're limiting our culture by always looking at like the early stages of artistry and saying that only this is hip hop. Like, what happens when hip hop gets older? Are we just gonna say, no, that stuff they're doing, like, you could call that smooth jazz, or like just call that soul music, or call that something else? Like, that's not hip hop. Like, no, it's all hip hop. It's all a part of the same culture in the end. It's just that if we stop putting this like boundary point of age on it, then we can say like there's levels and progressions that happen, and here's the different stages. And like, yes, the older generation started getting into this, and then the younger generation started to bring this, and then we can have opportunities for these worlds to meet and for the cultural exchange to happen between the different generations. And we're putting too many handcuffs on our progression by talking about age as like it's a real limitation of what we're doing. There's no limit. There's no limit. Oh, man. Let me see here. I'm getting a little congested here. Sorry if I'm sounding a little bit out of breath. I'm probably going to cut it in a little bit. I appreciate the conversation, though. Conversation's been amazing. I think it's an important topic. We'll be doing more of these. But yeah, man, let's see here. Take a couple more questions and then I'll cut it. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, let me get to that stuff. Okay. Sire says, if I'm not mistaken, DJ Cash Money used some cartoon samples. Man, it was a lot of producers using cartoon samples, and also like sitcom samples. That was the thing too. Like, you know, the sitcoms you grew up watching in your young days. You know, all of that stuff makes a big difference, and I think it gives you inputs that come with music. Like, you know, if you grew up watching stuff like Night Court and Family Ties and stuff like that, the music on that stuff is crazy. Like the music and the production quality of like old television definitely had a impact on how I hear music, and also like what's catchy for me. Cause a lot of those theme songs that used to come on with like cartoons and sitcoms, it was crazy. Like, man, like stuff was written differently. Commercials were written like the level of catchy music and jingles that I grew up with. Insane. So all of that makes a difference, and it has an impact on like what you gravitate towards musically as well. Jay Casino says, I grew up watching both Tom and Jerry and Dragon Ball Z. Yeah, you kind of in between, but that's dope. I mean, so you got both experiences, which is awesome. Sire says DJ Crazy Tunes. Yep, DJ Crazy Tunes was definitely obviously having a name like that alone tells you that he has some influences that come from the cartoons, right? Like it does. Cartoons are a big part of hip hop, especially. I believe it. Um, Old school Transformers theme has a weird sound structure. There's a whole yes, yeah, no, it's that's facts, bro. The old Transformers, listen to it. Yeah, if y'all don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to the old Transformers theme. Musically, it's they were on something else. They were on something else. That section that like crazy. It's crazy. And it's like that kind of stuff stuck with me. Like I remember that and was like, yo, why did they do that? Like, and just listening to like the guitar on that theme song alone. Yeah, bro, like that's that kind of stuff definitely has an impact on like how I hear things and like the kind of stuff I would try musically even because it was a deeply impactful thing that I heard at a young age that stuck with me. Yeah. Yeah, watch that video if you get a chance. I think it's mind blowing to kind of hear like how crazy they went on that. Let's see. Also, before Saturday morning cartoons, remember the music videos from the 80s, they would play on regular TV. Yeah, I mean, all the stuff we grew up with has like a very deep impact on like how you hear music later on in life as well. Some of those cartoons had live orchestras. No, back in the day, all of the stuff on TV, all of the cartoons and movies and all that stuff. They used to record that's when Hollywood was Hollywood. You talking about the old days when Hollywood was really popping. People used to have to record cues and scores and all that stuff in the big Hollywood studios. Like all of that stuff was done in like real, like with like real instruments and like watching. If you watch old TV and you listen to what's going on, like the horns and the strings and stuff, it's real. There was no VSTs. There was none of that. They were going in recording that stuff. Like I used to live in North Hollywood, which has like one of the highest concentrations of studios west of the Mississippi. Hollywood back in the day was the spot where a lot of stuff was being recorded and created, and the TV was a big part of the whole genesis of the music studio because TV was one of the main media outlets that needed music constantly. So they were always recording new themes and new cues and scores and whatnot for stuff. So you're talking about watching TV, it's music. The music was crazy back in like from Hollywood from I would say the 40s to the 80s. Yeah. Yeah. It was just a different level. DiBiase says DuckTales still. Yeah, life is like a hurricane. Yeah, come on, man. Come on, man. DuckTales. Yeah, that was fire, bro. Like if you listen to that, like to me, like, okay, so the DuckTales theme, I said, to me, the DuckTales theme sounds like a Luther Vandross song. I'm just being honest. Like, if you listen to it, it sounds like a Luther Vandross song. It sounds like one of the up-tempo Luther Vandross songs that you would have heard on like the Never Too Much album or something like that. It's got that bounce, and even the singer is sounding kind of like more of a soul singer in a way, like an 80s soul singer. It was a different level, bro. It was a different level. Yeah, DuckTales was fire. Let's see. Sire, the Fat Albert intro. Yeah, Fat Albert intro. Crazy. Crazy. Khalif Wynn says, I think the best way to destroy any generational tension is to, one, get in the studio with someone opposite your generation. You both create tracks and learn from each other. Ignore the internet. Yeah, I mean, the internet creates opportunities for us to like really just like throw shots and like hide. But realistically, I learned so much music production by working with older musician that was also a producer engineer. He wasn't even doing hip hop. He was more into like bluegrass and other stuff. And he taught me a lot about like music production and recording, and taught me about high-end equipment and got me my exposure to like recording with, 1176s and Neumann microphones and all that stuff. He taught me about all of that stuff. An old head, someone that like is definitely a boomer, So I think if you have respect and you like understand that you don't know everything, you can learn a lot from an old head. I learned so much from having that experience, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm glad I learned from an old head versus someone that was my age. I also learned from people that were my age, but the exposure I got from old heads transformed my career. They gave me the wisdom and the knowledge that I use the most, I would say. And that was in my 20s. So I have a deep reverence for the old head, because without the old head, I wouldn't have been able to do so much of what I've been able to do in my career. Let's see. Jay Casino says, I watched everything you mentioned. I'm still in my 20s. I feel like millennials are always in between. Yeah, I mean, millennials, like you're a young millennial, but I think you got some of the best of both. You still got to see outside. You still got to see some of the cool stuff that we had in terms of media, television, and whatnot. You saw some good times, and you saw technology and had access to a lot of the dope technology, and were young enough to do it in a way where you could experiment while you were younger. If you're in your like 28, 29 range, that younger millennial range, yeah, definitely. DiBiase says, my daughter watched Thundercats, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, He-Man. I mean, your daughter is different though. She has a music producer father that is exposing her to like all kinds of stuff. So I'm sure like your daughter will be elite, because she has a deep reverence and respect for you and what you do. And I think it translates into how she approaches creativity. I've seen what your daughter does. I've seen your daughter dancing. She's crazy on the dancing. I've seen her making beats and stuff. Like, your daughter is definitely going to be an elite person of her generation. No question about that. She will be one of the elite people that her peers will look at and say, how? How in the world? And it's, I think that early exposure and having influences like yourself changes the game for any musician. Having grown up with someone like that is the difference, definitely, for a lot of musicians that, I think about it like this. Tiger Woods, who is his father, and how did his father impact him? Stephen Curry, who is his father, and how did his father influence him? Listen, Kobe Bryant, who is his father, and how did his father influence him? You catch my drift here? Like, having that father in the household that has influence and has the ability to like mold and shape the child and provide the influences early, and doesn't force, but also kind of encourages the exposure and refinement of the skill set. It often has the ability to create elite elite performers within any field. And I think your daughter specifically, I feel like she is going to be one of those. She already shows very elite qualities. Jay Casino says, my pops exposed me to all the stuff you mentioned. See, again, it's the fathers. I think the fathers really have a big understated influence on the elite. The elite outliers that we have. Joe Jackson, a great American hero, I would say. Because look at all of the elite musicians that he produced out of his household. Much respect to Joe Jackson. We don't get Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson and the Jackson 5 and all of the amazing music that came from that household without Joe Jackson, the father. So that early influence from the father is definitely a big one. It's a huge one. Man, I'm gonna have to cut it at this point, y'all, because I got guests coming. But listen, I appreciate y'all. I've enjoyed this conversation. I thank y'all for spending this Friday afternoon with your boy. More of this to come. I would say keep being inspired, keep being passionate about the art. I don't care what age you are, whether you're a young head, you're an old head. I think there's room for you to do music, and there's room for you to have an impact on music. So just keep growing, keep learning, keep sharing with each other, and respect each other. I think it's a community. If we respect each other and we keep growing with each other, we will have a community of powerful musicians that create new powerful musicians and really expand the possibilities of music and sound. So salute to everybody in here. I appreciate y'all, fam. I'm gonna head out. I'm thinking I'll probably do something on Sunday, so stay tuned. But yeah, man, subscribe, like the video if you got any value out of this conversation. And yeah, man, until next time, I want to tell y'all peace and God bless.